Take a look at this passage. This is John chapter 6, starting at verse 5. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes, and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread, that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, This is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into the mountain himself alone. Now here we see the general perception of the people that they're expecting someone to come to be a king and to overthrow the Romans. And the disciples were the same way. They were a zealous bunch. Oftentimes they wouldn't really consult with Jesus. They would reason among themselves. Like there was the time when Jesus says, Beware the leaven of the Pharisees, and they start reasoning among themselves what this means. What's this mean? And Jesus had to perceive what they were thinking about. And this here, I'm going to leave you with some questions about this passage. Right here, Jesus asks, When shall we buy bread for that these may eat? This is said to prove them, for he himself knew what he would do. Now, the disciples were always relying upon buying stuff. You see this? Jesus is asking, When shall we buy this bread? And Philip, he goes into the treasury and says, We got 200 pennies worth, but that's not enough bread for all of them. And then the 5 loaves of barley and the 2 small fish were brought to Jesus, and Jesus made the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, and the men sat down about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and he gave thanks, and he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down. And likewise he did with the fishes, as much as they would. Now Jesus had a choice to make here. I mean, there was 200 pennies worth right here. There was 200 pennies. Jesus could have multiplied 200 pennies and made enough money for them to go out, buy the food, bring it back for them to eat. But he chose rather to divide the fishes and the loaves. Why did he not do it with the money? He did ask the disciples, When shall we buy bread? You would think he would have multiplied the money instead of the fish and the loaves. Don't we oftentimes, well, maybe not often, but occasionally we'll hear some preacher praying and thank God for the offering and asking the Lord to multiply the offering. When the Lord didn't multiply these 200 pennies, why would he multiply the offering? So after they had all eaten, we can see that how many baskets were taken up? 12. Now this here is an interesting number because how many disciples are there? There's 12. If you're a disciple of Jesus and you're figuring on following him, are you going to be carrying around baskets? What would be the reason for carrying around a basket? Now, I imagine this was Judas's idea, that these baskets are normally used for offerings. Well, Jesus is preaching, the disciples, Judas would get them together with the baskets, and he'd send them around into the crowd, and he'd go himself, and they'd all collect an offering. This is what I'm supposing. And it's funny that there was 12 baskets of fragments filled up instead of having an offering that they would have expected. They now have baskets of food. So Jesus apparently is not so interested in the money as much as he is in the food and the people.